I don't even know who had a wilder weekend between Floyd Shivambu and Paul Mashatile, because frankly, they both chose to go and hang out with villains masquerading as churches over the last few days for Easter. Floyd Shivambu, Secretary General of the MK Party, went to Shepard Bushiri's place in Malawi. Shepard Bushiri, who obviously fled the country after being accused of more than 100 million rands worth of stealing and fraud and money laundering, and over a dozen sexual assault allegations in South Africa. That's what Floyd did. And then, after enormous backlash, his own political party, the MK Party, denounced him. But that's not even as mad as what happened with Paul Mashatile, who went to Kwasizabantu mission, the cult-like masquerading as Christian mission in KwaZulu-Natal, which has faced years of allegations for money laundering and stealing and covering up of sexual assault and basically slave labor. Oh, and also aiding and abetting the apartheid state to capture ANC operatives during apartheid. That's what Mashatile did. Oh, and by the way, the vice president also casually mentioned that he was pretty sure he survived an assassination attempt 3 weeks ago. Why didn't he mention it 3 weeks ago? Unclear. Why didn't the ANC talk about it 3 weeks ago? Unclear. Why didn't any of the media pick it up, or indeed SAPS talk about it 3 weeks ago? Unclear. What is going on? Oh, this is just absolutely wild. And genuinely, I know I say it every time, but the WhatsApp line is really where I want you to chat today. 0607-613-436, because we need to try and figure this out. Right, so let's start with the story that came out on Saturday. This claim, this allegation that Paul Mashatile's motorcade, the car that he was in, was shot at 3 weeks ago when he was leaving the ANC NEC meeting in Boksburg. You'll remember we covered it because that was the NEC meeting where we thought that maybe they would choose to evict the Democratic Alliance from the GNU, and also they discussed the 0.5% VAT increase. That looks like it's coming on the 1st of May. That's why Herman Mashaba is tweeting like a furious drunk girl who's just been broken up with at 1 a.m. But allegedly 3 weeks ago, and there's a picture going around of all of these holes, or at least these marks in the front windshield of Mashatile's car, and it's hard to tell if they're gunshots or something else. They certainly didn't get through, but it would have been bulletproof.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Assuming it's a bulletproof windscreen, it would take quite a lot to do that amount of damage, I feel like.
Totally. So maybe it is gunshots. Maybe. We don't know. But frankly, why did no one talk about it 3 weeks ago? It's kind of big news, right?
It's wild.
Why is SAPS only investigating now? And why are our only 2 quotes about it from SAPS saying they're investigating an allegation and Mashatile's spokesperson? Why hasn't the ANC said anything about their deputy president?
Yeah.
Why hasn't the presidency or the government said anything
right.
about the vice president of a country? Allegedly, someone tried to kill him 3 weeks ago. It's quite extraordinary, but I will remind you, and I am not here to tell you whether or not to believe Mashatile's claim, because I don't have any more information than I've just given you. But context really matters in this country. And there is quite a long recent history of different politicians claiming that there were attempts on their lives without providing evidence that they were attempts on their lives. Jacob Zuma is a great example. There are others of people saying that they survived assassination attempts with minimal to no evidence provided, and maybe they did, but also it serves a bit of an agenda, right? If you are the subject of an assassination attempt and you publicize it in the right way, a la Donald Trump, it can actually do pretty well for you and can reinforce narratives about how I'm just fighting back against the evil establishment. I'm the champion of the people who's upsetting the big people. And so I'm worth voting for and supporting because I'm not like the other bad guys at the top end of the elite power nexus of this country. Now, Mashatile hasn't turned it into that, but you can imagine. And the other thing about Mashatile, and this again, take it with a pinch of salt, it's just important context, is that there are rumors abounding. And ever since particularly, remember he collapsed on stage last year at, I think it was a church event in one of the northern parts of South Africa. Rumors have abounded about his health and about him not being in very good health. So you could also imagine, but again, this is just context. I'm not saying that this happened, not a conspiracy theorist, but you can imagine that there are reasons, good reasons, to try and find explanations for someone dipping out or having a bad medical health moment. But again, he hasn't done that in this situation. It's just important context to remember when considering these kinds of claims in South Africa. So all of this is really important context. But the reason why I bring it up is all the more reason to go, why didn't you tell us about this 3 weeks ago when it happened? Why did it only come out now? That's mad. And the other story with Paul Mashatile, and maybe you can also think about why the story came out now in that context as potentially a distraction or at least an attention shifter, is the fact that he spent Easter Sunday at Kwasizabantu mission in KZN to celebrate their 50th anniversary since they were founded by somebody, Stegen, a German guy, 50 years ago. Now, if you don't know about Kwasizabantu, let me catch you up. It was created to try, from its perspective, be a self-sustaining upliftment of impoverished people kind of settlement, right? So the principles are good. Live in and build your own homes, farm the land, live off the land, be self-sufficient, all of that good stuff around some or other Christian doctrine that they championed at Kwasizabantu. But the settlement was also always really secretive and quite cut off, and no one knew really what was going on inside the settlement, even as there were lots of worshippers and lots of people staying there and following the doctrine of the leaders in Kwasizabantu. And then a few years ago, a massive investigation from News 24, amongst then later others, found piles and piles and piles of allegations, very, very serious allegations. Firstly, of sexual abuse. Lots and lots of it, sexual abuse, and not just of women, but also children, girl children. Tons of allegations, tons of victims came forward claiming that this is that they had suffered sexual abuse and the attempt by the church to cover it up. But also so much more than that. So rape and beatings, virginity testing, underpaying and just not paying workers for various farming projects, cutting families off from each other, multi-million rand worth fraud and money laundering scheme. In fact, Kwasizabantu had satellites in Switzerland and Germany, satellite churches, that in the end cut themselves off from the parent organization in South Africa because it looked like they were practicing financial shenanigans and skullduggery with donor money in Switzerland and Germany. And those organizations didn't want to be a part of that. Yeah, embezzlement of donor money. And then some of the really wild stuff that a lot of people don't know about Kwasizabantu. A former church member called Koos Greef said during the 1980s, Kwasizabantu worked with the apartheid state to catch ANC operatives fighting in the struggle against apartheid. Apparently what happened was, and then this was, by the way, corroborated by both sides, ANC and ex-apartheid, so corroborated by everyone involved. Apparently what would happen was Kwasizabantu would let the word out to ANC operatives that Kwasizabantu was a safe haven for them to seek refuge. And then Kwasizabantu would welcome them and they would stay the night, and in the middle of the night, an apartheid police operative would come and arrest the people. So literally working with the apartheid state to capture ANC operatives, which I feel deserves more attention than it's currently got. Like, that's kind of a big deal, like a massive, massive, massive deal. And then more allegations, like there was the one quote about how it's racist in there too. There's one quote from a source quote saying, when you speak to people that grew up there, white and black people, it's very quickly becomes clear that at the mission there was also apartheid, there was also separation. The black kids stayed in very poor dormitories, whereas the white kids and their parents stayed in better accommodation, for example. So this is Kwasizabantu. And ever since these big revelations came out, there's been minimal to no pursuit of justice by the Justice Department, which is sus. It is. With this weight of allegations. Some kind of religious organization's body produced a report that basically gave Kwasizabantu a free pass. I wonder why that happened. Yeah. And all of the victims who have come forward have denounced that report and said they will not engage with religious authorities until they retract that report, which they said was surface level and basically just parroted exactly what Kwasizabantu said about themselves. Yeah. But what's interesting is that Kwasizabantu's collusion with the apartheid state was probably to allow them to get away with what they were doing and avoid scrutiny from the apartheid state and maybe even get financial blessings from the apartheid state. And then in 2025, Vice President of the country and the ANC, Paul Mashatile, rocks up for the commemoration of 50 years of Kwasizabantu, even though everyone knows about these allegations. For the past 4 years, everyone's supposed to be boycotting Aquel Water because Kwasizabantu, one of their companies, runs the Aquel water plant that provides still and sparkling water, I guess, to the country in like any store that you go into. And Paul Mashatile rocks up and says allegations are just allegations. And he says, what an amazing mission, all this self-sustainability, this like teaching to learn off the land, and good church practices and values and whatever. And he committed to state support and investment in Kwasizabantu.
I think that's the actual wild part of the story, right? Like, I mean, state backing
for this place.
Yeah.
It's really, really beyond belief.
Do you think they just Googled it and saw that they have 4.4 stars on Google?
How are their Google reviews?
Look, a lot of them are obviously about the allegations.
Yes.
But out of 336 reviews, they do have 4.4 stars.
4.4 stars. It's pretty good. I imagine that they got a lot of people in Kwasizabantu to do the reviews.
Absolutely.
So now the question becomes, what is Paul Mashatile doing there? And I will remind you, if you don't know, that it's a tried and tested practice for politicians around the world to go and appear at and attach themselves to major religious organizations. Of course it is. In every country in the world, of course it is. It's how you immediately get congregants who will listen to you and might vote for you if their church leaders give you their blessing. Like Ramaphosa went to the ZCC event this weekend, like the biggest church gathering in Southern Africa. It makes sense that he would be there because he wants to curry favor. Kwasizabantu must have followers. They must have supporters. They must have congregants who disbelieve all the allegations. And they are in KwaZulu-Natal, which is where the ANC is hemorrhaging votes and support, losing wards and council seats to the MK party, had an absolute bottom out in the last national election. So you could view it from the perspective of trying to gain relevance in KwaZulu-Natal with the followers of Kwasizabantu without... or maybe placing a bet that the vast majority of South Africa don't care about Kwasizabantu or don't know that much about it, such that Paul Mashatile going will not dissuade an ANC voter from voting ANC. I think that's probably the bet that they're making. I don't know.
It's possible.
It's possible. I mean, the other one, it could just be business interests because, you know, Kwasizabantu since apartheid days seem to have done an incredibly good job at keeping big business interests close to politics so that they can get away with all of their seemingly clearly alleged evils, right? So that's the Kwasizabantu story and the assassination attempt claims or suspicion story of Paul Mashatile this weekend. Okay, let's talk about Shepard Bushiri. Let's talk about Floyd Shivambu. So Floyd Shivambu, as we've covered on this show already, in a massive civil war against Duduzile Zuma, the subject of that unbelievable tirade from Zuma with all those F words and this and that in the middle of the night on the dark place formerly known as Twitter, maybe a month ago now. Floyd Shivambu went to Malawi this weekend. And he was welcomed warmly with words of praise and affirmation, and he gave them back to self-proclaimed prophet Shepard Bushiri. Now, if South Africans, and many of them don't know much about Kwasizabantu, we really know about Shepard Bushiri. He's a self-proclaimed prophet who claims all kinds of magical miracles, although he technically says that it's actually Jesus performing miracles that happen to just be in his presence. I don't know if his idea is maybe Jesus picks up his phone calls before anybody else's and really listens to his requests. But Shepard Bushiri has had wild claims of miracles around him. He claims to have cured people from HIV, like in a morning, just prayers quickly, to cure people from HIV. People have claimed that his kind of prosperity gospel has transformed people's lives. One woman claimed that she couldn't get a job for months and months, and by the end of a day when Shepard Bushiri was praying for her, she had 2 job offers. There have been claims that people who can't really walk could then walk. Lots and lots of kind of mystical healing stuff with virtually, again, no evidence. Because it's funny how miracles never happen on camera. They never happen with photographers around or any kind of reliable recording, you know, the kind of evidence that we expect from literally every single other part of life. If you claim that Venezuela exists, you've got to be able to show that there's a Venezuela that exists. Easy example. But Shepard Bushiri has been in a lot of trouble, and he actually fled the country because he was arrested a number of years ago before COVID. I think it was 2018, 2019 times. He and his wife were arrested for accusations of over 100 million rands worth of money laundering and stealing. There are lots and lots of claims from people who said that Shepard Bushiri said that he was going to invest their money and give them extraordinary returns and dividends. You know, classic pyramid scheme style grift. It's like, send me 100,000 Rand now, and in 30 days, you'll get 150,000 Rand back. And he did that to a lot of people, and no money ever came back to them. He also spent nearly 500,000 Rand on clothing well, no, he didn't. He got the clothing and then never paid for that money. Never paid for those clothing back to the value of about 500,000 Rand. But ultimately, crime investigators say the case involves 102 million South African rands, which is why it was completely extraordinary when he and his wife were offered bail of just 100,000 Rand each. You know, the whole point of bail is to not let people ultimately escape prosecution, right? That's the whole point of bail. So you either put in so much money for bail that somebody is really not going to flee the country because they need that money back. 100K, 200K, 100K for him and his wife in the grand scheme of over 100 million Rand that we know of stolen. Come on, please, don't be ridiculous. He has many investment companies. He's invested in many, many mines, allegedly. Got different shareholdings around the world. But the second thing is that they mustn't be a flight risk. He's from Malawi. He's got an unbelievably enormous following. And the allegation is, because no one really knows how he got across the border, but the one theory is that he was flown across the border in the Malawian president's private jet. So that's a thing. And again, if he's a hero in Malawi, as a politician, you can see why a politician would do that, because you bring the good shepherd home, right? And you save him from this prosecution. So after he fled, there were more investigations, and this is where it gets even darker. In 2021, the South African police charged Shepard Bushiri with over a dozen counts of rape relating to 8 different victims. There were 3 warrants of arrest relating to separate charges against him. The police claimed that he targeted women and girls at his church. Some were as young as 15, and her sisters were kept in hotel rooms and brutally sexually assaulted for hours before being given between $500 and $700 and asked to leave. So there's that. And police later announced, according to the reporting, they were investigating Bushiri's associates who they accused of intimidating victims, and reported that several victims had come forward between 2016 and 2018 and accused Bushiri of sexual assault before recanting their testimonies after being intimidated or paid off. So he's also facing those charges. And more recently, the asset forfeiture unit has impounded his 58 million rands worth private jet in Lanseria Airport that allegedly was used with a lot of his money laundering and money shifting operations. So there's all that. And South Africans are pretty united on that guy. You'll be bleeping that. You'll hear that bleeped. But now we need to ask why Floyd Shivambu went there. Because Floyd Shivambu went, he tweeted about it. He was welcomed with open arms. Bushiri said, so great to have this fellow African revolutionary, blah, 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 blah. And then the MK party at 1 a.m, which is really when people say stuff that really matter, said this.
Yeah, in their media statement, they said the Umkhonto weSizwe Party, MK Party, wishes to categorically distance itself from the recent visit by our Secretary General to the Enlightened Christian Gathering, or ECG, church led by self-proclaimed prophet Shepard Bushiri in Malawi. The party wishes to make it unequivocally clear that this was not sanctioned, endorsed, or initiated by the leadership or any official structure of the MK Party. The Secretary General undertook this visit in his personal capacity and without the mandate or knowledge of the party.
Is that the full statement?
That's half of it.
Okay.
You want the rest?
Well, just because in the first half, they don't denounce Bushiri. They just say, we weren't part of this.
Fair play.
Which is quite strategic.
Let's see here. We remain firmly opposed to any association with individuals who are fugitives from justice.
I see.
Our values are rooted in integrity, justice, and accountability, and we reject any actions that compromise the reputation and ethical standing of our movement. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, the MK Party strongly condemns all forms of gender-based violence and the exploitation of vulnerable communities, especially innocent Christian believers.
Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, but who leads your party, bro? Like, okay.
There was a comma there. By individuals who manipulate faith for personal enrichment or to evade justice.
Okay. Oh, it's close.
Followed by the party stance of the victim, etc.
Not quite denouncing Bushiri, though. Yeah. Saying if he's found guilty and he is a fugitive from justice. That's what the MK Party said. That is extraordinary. I need you to understand that that is extraordinary for a political party to wink, nudge, as close as possible, denounce their Secretary General from doing something like that. And it does call into question, Floyd Shivambu's stature in the party, like who wrote that statement and why and how. It reminds us that Duduzile Zuma has still not really faced disciplinary charges for what she did back to Shivambu on the dark place formerly known as Twitter a little while ago. But it begs the final question, which is, why did Floyd Shivambu do that? Why did he do that? Now, there have been lots of speculations. The first one is maybe Bushiri paid him, could have just paid him a fabulous sum of money to come through and hang out. It would make sense for Bushiri to do that. Some people, though, are saying that Floyd Shivambu wants or maybe needs the money so that Bushiri will pay for his legal costs of defending himself in the ongoing investigation into him and Malema looting from VBS, allegedly. I'm not sure that Floyd Shivambu didn't already have a plan for that money.
Right.
I feel like once you're hanging out in the MK party, there are a lot of people there who are there facing serious matters from the law. And with Dali Mpofu then a bunch of other financial mechanisms, I'm sure that was already taken care of. But then why would Floyd Shivambu go? And I wonder, I don't know, maybe he thinks that he'll have to flee the country to escape justice. He wants a like a time in Malawi. Don't know. But maybe similarly to what we discussed with Paul Mashatile, maybe he thinks that there are still lots of followers of Shepard Bushiri in the north of South Africa, which is where we know the MK party is targeting next. So they're doing well in KwaZulu-Natal. There are significant Zulu communities in the northern provinces of South Africa, and that's kind of where Shepard Bushiri did very well when he was in South Africa. And maybe he's thinking, similar to Paul Mashatile, that followers of Shepard Bushiri will go, wow, an endorsement from Shepard Bushiri for a leader of the MK party. Maybe with a statement like that, which doesn't quite condemn Shepard Bushiri, they might go, we don't really care about that statement. We care about the fact that Floyd Shivambu rocked up. Could lead to votes, could lead to Floyd Shivambu popularity in those areas of the country, could honestly just make him more popular so he can fight for himself harder in the MK party. But it could be a strategy by the MK party similar to Paul Mashatile and Kwasizabantu, where they think that potential voters who don't like Shepard Bushiri won't care enough about Floyd going to see Shepard Bushiri and getting an endorsement from him to not vote for the MK party. They'll be like, we vote for the MK party for a ton of other reasons, including Zuma. But that acolytes, followers of Shepard Bushiri will be persuaded, and that could cause some kind of reputational boost and relevance for the MK party in the north of South Africa that could lead to votes. That is my best theory.